The Free Hindu Temples movement has suddenly gained a lot of momentum. It is really a several decades old struggle that was pioneered by people like Pujya Swami Dayanand Saraswati of Arshavidya Gurukulam, who left his mortal frame a few years ago. Then there were others like Sri Subramanian Swami and the now president of India Collective Trust, Sri T.R. Ramesh. Of course, there are expected to be others as well. But these are some of the most recognizable names today when we think of the Free Temples movement. The issue has now received a great boost and the much needed public attention with personalities as diverse as Sadhguru Jaggi Vasudev and R.J. Ronak taking it up in their own ways. Meanwhile, the BJP president tweeted last week that they intended to form a separate board for the administration of Hindu temples that would be represented by scholars and saints. To be fair, it is not clear if this board is meant for Tamil Nadu or the whole country. But in either case, it is not the right solution. It is in fact a disastrous idea. For almost a year now, rumors have been afloat that Vishwa Hindu Parishad, an affiliate of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, is conceptualizing an arrangement of this kind where all temples in India would be under a single board comprising of scholars and saints like this. Of course, we are free to speculate who these scholars and saints would be, but let us not be unnecessarily speculative at this stage and be adversarial. The announcement and the buzz around this issue gives us an opportunity to put the issue of government control of temples in the right perspective, to really get to the bottom of what freedom of temples means beyond just the mere slogan, and finally, the wisdom to reject bad ideas that get packaged as great solutions. Before we explore the issue of freedom of temples, it is unfortunately necessary to first spell out for most political Hindus what a temple really is. Because unless we understand what a Hindu temple is, its autonomy or lack thereof would mean nothing. I'd like to add a caveat here that concepts that I'm going to talk about right now are not scientific. That is, the principles of temple architecture, ritual, and other related ideas do not allow for an investigation to be carried out by the scientific method. Though temple construction is certainly a marvelous engineering achievement and would involve engineering experts, the subtle principles of temple design operate in the paradigm of religion or adhyatma and do not need any kind of scientific validation. Many modern Hindus tend to undermine the significance of the esoteric by rationalizing it and reducing it to hollow pseudoscientific explanations. Now, with that out of the way, let's see what the temple really means. The temple is not an ordinary building. The great 20th century philosopher Anand Kumaraswamy interprets the Hindu temple as the image of the cosmos with its drama of disintegration and reintegration. Noted scholar late Kapila Vatsyayan calls the temple a living organism, and in her masterpiece, the book called The Square and the Circle of the Indian Arts, she explains how temple architecture gives a concrete form to the metaphor of the cosmic Purusha, of the Purusha Sukta of Rig Veda, just as the site of a Vedic yajna does in a different setting. In this scheme, the worshipper is the counterpart of the person offering the Vedic yajna, and she quotes several texts like the Rig Veda, the Shatapath Brahman, and Tantra Samuchya, and notes the following about temple architecture, and I read: Purusha is the horizontal ground plan. He is also the vertical man. His head is the sky, the Amalaka. His nabhi, navel, the Garbhagriha. The lower moldings, the feet, pada. In the different parts are located the different senses as well as bird, animal, human, and divine life. All in all, the architectural plan of the temple relates each single unit of its crowded abundance of mass and design to an aspect of the macrocosm. And we are back again to a consideration of the five bhutas, the three gunas, the eight directions, dishas, and the several planets, nakshatras of the Upanishadic worldview. As expected, the construction of a temple is a matter of great technicality, and texts like the Brihat Samhita state that the selection and clearance of the site for construction is a matter of utmost importance. There are strict environmental guidelines, environment-related injunctions provided. The reason why most ancient temples are found on riverbanks, confluence of rivers, hilltops, mountain slopes, and seashores. Therefore, Swayambhu temples such as Kedarnath, Kamakhya, Amarnath, and so on are naturally occurring places of divine manifestation where the man-made superstructure is a much later addition. The divinity in these places is made manifest by Mother Nature herself through a very unique and delicate equilibrium of the Panchabhutas, that is the five elements of Hindu cosmology, and which is why road construction, dam construction, and deforestation that always accompanies the development of such shrines for mass pilgrimage are risky undertakings from a strictly religious point of view. Religion overlaps almost entirely with ecology in Hindu culture due to this very deep connection. So a temple is first and foremost the abode of the deity. And the primary function of the temple is the Nitya Puja of the Devata that it houses. Everything else, everything is secondary. The Nitya Puja schedule, that is the vidhi and the frequency of daily puja, how puja must be done by whom and how many times a day, all this is fixed at the time of the establishment of the temple. If it is a consecrated temple, then the deity is invoked in the sculpture at the time of consecration by a complex and elaborate ritual of prana pratishtha, which often spans many days. These complex rituals of consecration, worship, and purification are laid out in various texts like the Agamas, the Sthala Puranas, etc., and vary widely from one temple to another. For any major temple, everything from what kind of food to offer, to which mantras to chant, and to how many utsavas or festivals are to be held, when and how, everything is fixed as per its own specific shastra, which in turn is linked to the nature of the devata and his or her preferences. This is the reason why every temple is unique and without parallel. Two different temples may house the same devata, but in entirely different forms, which makes them totally different from each other. Swami Ayyappa is in the Nashtika Brahmachari form only and only in Sabrimala, and there are no restrictions on women entry in other Ayyappa temples, as we all know. Same devata, but different manifestations. When the devata is different, we can imagine how divergent the context becomes between one shrine and another. Now, in a nutshell, the whole purpose of a temple is to keep the devata happy. Ritual pujas that please the devata, music and dance to keep him or her entertained, offering bhoga that she likes to eat, taking him or her out on prescribed tithis for recreation, conducting regular prayaschittas to preemptively sort of apologize for any inadvertent human mistakes in ritual. Every single action in a temple is carried out keeping the likes and dislikes of the deity in mind. When we visit a temple, we go for the darshan of the devata. And if the temple is functioning properly, meaning that if the staff is doing their job of keeping the devata happy, only then our individual prayers or kamya pujas are answered. This brings us to the various roles of the temple staff. Dr. Deepa Duraiswamy, in an exquisite work of scholarship, which Indic Academy has so kindly helped publish as a book by the name Temple Management in the Agamas. The author has focused on Shaiva temples and written a meticulous account of how they are managed traditionally. The book describes in great detail the Shastric recommendations for remuneration to the temple staff. And it is quite plain that the income of the Acharya is supposed to be quite high as per the Agamas. And on special occasions, they are to be paid in gold. Various priests lower in the hierarchy and all the other staff, including the gardener, musicians, dancers, guards, etc., all must be paid handsomely. The logic again is that if the servitors of the deity are unhappy, it negatively affects the mood of the deity, and that is wholly avoidable. As in various other cultures, the king was seen as a divine agent in India, and managing the great temples in his kingdom was a significant part of the royal responsibility. In many cases, the king ruled on behalf of the deity and was officially referred to as the servant of the presiding devata. As Dr. Duraiswamy has documented in the same book, the duties of the king included, and I'll just read out from the book, the duties of the king were preserving ritual tradition, following the right tantra, appointing the acharyas, ensuring right kriya at the right time, performing the annual mahotsava. As you can see, the list goes on and on. Preserving the sanctity of the temple, ensuring continuity of Nitya Puja, ensuring rules of Shaucha, etc., etc. It was quite a hefty list. We don't live in the times of the kings anymore. So the question of the relationship between the temple and the secular Indian state of today must be answered keeping in mind everything that I've mentioned about the temple in this talk so far. Far from allocating a percentage of the national budget for keeping devatas and temples happy, the state no longer even recognizes devatas as real entities except for litigation purposes. Instead, the government looks at temples as yet another source of revenue for the state treasury. This view is also shared by a large section of Hindu society. Those who like to call themselves liberal, progressive, modern, etc., etc. The worth of a temple is measured by the amount of money it generates, and it is treated like just another business. The degradation of the Hindu temple is perhaps the clearest example of how colonialism destroyed Hindu institutions and morally crippled Hindu society to an extent that people prefer to put money in government donation boxes rather than paying the pujari for conducting puja, which would be the right thing to do as per scriptural injunctions. Because no puja is complete without the pujari being properly honored for his services. As Dr. Duraiswamy notes, the spirit behind Dakshina is one of honoring and making the priest happy rather than payment for his services. Recently, there was the famous case of a temple in the news whose priest was paid something like rupees 19 per month. That was his salary. Now, for reasons beyond the scope of this talk, a large section of Hindu society has been trained to stereotype the temple pujari as inherently evil. The heartless apathy towards the plight of the temple priests is surely one of the major moral failures of contemporary Hindu society. Needless to say, it does not bode well with the gods. In pre-colonial India, the Hindu kings bore the onus of meeting the material needs of the temples. They donated vast tracts of land to the temple and its staff. The regular visitors were required to provide material and funds only and only for the individual pujas specifically conducted for them. In modern times, this arrangement has been turned on its head, and the temples are seen as cash cows and marketed as tourism destinations. The governments routinely grab the land that was the royal gift to the temple made by a king in a bygone era, and now it sells them off or leases them to corporations, earning a fat rental income. The civil servants, another relic from the colonial era, arrogantly disrupt centuries-long religious traditions or poke their reformist nose in temple rituals. Practices like Pashubali, Madi Snanam are sneered at and banned by ignorant hordes of illiterate progressives. How can a good mother want to drink blood? They ask in earnest, puzzled by the lolling tongue and violent demeanor of Ma Kali. In the name of development, cultural heritage is bulldozed, and many living temples and mathas are handed over to the Archaeological Survey of India so that they can be turned into museums and entry tickets sold to visitors arriving in ever-increasing numbers thanks to the shiny new 8-lane highways. It is, of course, good for business. Like good Protestant Christians justifying colonialism and genocide, this moral collapse is rationalized by conscientious Hindus as the will of God with a capital G. Every single day that the Indian state continues to run Hindu temples, it pushes Hindu civilization one step closer to extinction. Now that the pressure for freeing temples is building, the government will sooner or later have to make a move, even if it is just symbolic. As I have explained, temples for them are not abodes of the deities, but a cash cow and an arena for social engineering experiments. It is in this context that their proposals must be evaluated. It is the same bunch that pushed for women entry in Sabarimala and Shani Shingnapur, tried banning Pashubali in Tripur Sundari temple, and killed the joy of bursting crackers on Diwali by running a sustained propaganda based on outright lies. Creating a central board for all temples is an evil idea that must be nipped in the bud. It is based on a colonized understanding of dharma and seeks to, borrowing Professor Bharat Gupta's phrase, commandmentalized dharma. For no two kshetras are same, no two rituals are same, no two sampradayas are same, no two akhadas are same, no two devatas are same, no two forms of the same devata are the same, and therefore no two temples are same. And since no two temples are the same, a high command board of scholars and saints appointed by a semi-literate neta sitting in Lutyens, Delhi, will spell disaster for the kaleidoscopic landscape of Sanatan Dharma and turn it into a monochromatic list of commandments that future generations of Hindus will memorize. There is only one solution to the problem. Hand back the temples to the communities they belong to with no ifs and buts. There must be multiple levels of administration according to the size of the temples, which would be in the best interests of preserving the autonomy and diversity of rituals and the numerous primary and secondary sampradayas of Sanatan Dharma. The core temple operations are anyway taken care of by the community. Some people ask, quite rhetorically, who will manage the temples if and when the government exits? Do you have an alternative structure to replace it? This, in my opinion, is a pretty useless question. The government is piggybacking on the local communities, not the other way around. No one will miss the executive officer and other sarkari babus when they leave. The temples will be managed as they had been for thousands of years before the great Indian Republic was formed. So, as the tweet thread by Indie Collective makes clear, and I'll just read it directly. Local village temples can be administered by village-level elected committees. Where they belong to particular sampradayas, they shall be administered by people of non-political background from or upholding that sampradaya. Larger sampradaya temples which have hereditary trustees should be left to the hereditary trustees. Where there are no hereditary trustees in most larger temples, there used to be a scheme of administration before government took over. In such cases, those schemes, which generally involved a mix of trustees and representatives from various communities associated with that temple, must be brought back. For temples that have a nationwide participation, individual schemes of administration can be framed specifically. For such temples, the system of hereditary trustees and local elected trustees should be used, along with acharya representatives from the sampradaya from other locations having a seat on the board. More on this will be published on the ICT website, hopefully, but I want to conclude this talk here. Freedom does not come for free. There is a price that it extracts. Freedom of temples will not also come for free. It will extract a price from us in the form of sacrifice. The sacrifice of ignorance, apathy, vested interests, and entitlement. This is our chance to re-establish the civilizational connection with our gods. If only we stop worshipping the sorry phantom that is the Indian state.